This is Christian de la Huerta with Soulful Power. And we've been talking about this journey of becoming a hero. What does it mean to be a hero in the 21st century? In very practical, real ways. And we've been talking about the ego and the way that false sense of identity, sometimes called the small self, keeps us playing small and in perpetual states of defensiveness and protectiveness. We've also been talking about how part of what the ego does is keeps ourselves in a state of victimhood, holding others responsible for what they did or didn't do in relationship to us. So we keep ourselves in a state of disempowerment. Poor me, woe is me. And we spoke in the last session about the antidote to that, which is taking personal accountability for every aspect of our lives. No matter what happened, we get to choose how we're going to be in response to that. Another layer of this conversation has to do with projection. Projection is a classic defense mechanism. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, talked about how we attract people into our lives and we create situations so that we can see some of the areas in us that are unhealed. And there are blind spots. So we're never going to see it in ourselves, but we can see it in others. That we pull into our lives so that we can see these hidden aspects of us. So think about when we go to a movie. You know, we see the projection out there, but the source of it is really behind us. So projection means that we judge something. We make something wrong over there that is also in here. And the more that whatever they do that gets our goat and gets us pissed off or we feel like total failures, the clearer it is that too is in us. So the ego walks around, pointing fingers and blaming and holding everybody else responsible for every aspect of our lives. It also walks around with a handheld mirror that it shoves in your face and says, you did this, you don't do that, you always do this, you never do that. So it's always feeling very righteous and pointing the finger of blame and blaming others. Like anybody can do this. To turn the mirror around is nothing less than heroic. So if whatever's out there is in here too. And that's the stuff of heroes. All right, so let me tell you a story from my life to help illustrate this. A few years ago, I took my mom on a cruise. It was a 10-day cruise from Rio to Buenos Aires. We got an amazing deal for just a few $100. And we shared a cabin. Mistake number one. I should have known better. I know enough about myself that I need time alone. When I don't get time alone, that I start being pulled and losing my center, and where the ego can get the best of me. And my mom doesn't travel lightly, so all week, I'm schlepping all her bags and her extra pillows, and I'm schlepping all my stuff, and it's so getting no time alone, and I'm not sleeping well because my mom has sleep apnea, so it's like sleeping with Darth Vader, and I'm not sleeping at all. She also is overweight and diabetic, and doesn't take care of herself much. So I'm watching her go to town on these buffets, and I'm having to actually take some self-discipline, like having to process myself. Like, all right, who's paying for the cruise? Whose idea was it? I know what kind of food gets served in a cruise. It's like make peace with it. I knew what I was getting into, but it's taking work. We missed a couple of ports that we couldn't exit because of bad weather or mechanical problems, so the pressure keeps building. Finally, we arrive at the last port of entry, which was Buenos Aires, and because we're using my miles to fly back and forth, we had to stay like an extra 2 or 3 days. Last day, we're going to go see a tango show. We're going to go to dinner somewhere else before that, and in the afternoon, we go to this famous flea market. And my mom sees this ring that she's got to have. But this is before Square, and she didn't have enough cash. I didn't have enough cash on me. The story could have ended here. But I hear these words coming out of my mouth. It's like, but I do have an emergency stash back at the apartment, not thinking that any rational human being would ever want to dip into an emergency stash. That's what it's for. An emergency, and a ring certainly doesn't constitute an emergency in my book. But anyway, I knew at the moment that I could say no, but I overrode them. And now you add time pressure. So I'm tired, I haven't had time alone, I haven't slept well. And now you add time pressure, now you've got a perfect storm, a perfect way that for my ego to get hijacked and react. So, because now we have to go clear across town to go pick up the darn ring before we go to the restaurant, before we go to the tango show. So like, my mom doesn't move fast. So I'm like, hey mom, we gotta go, looking at the clock, and finally we get in the cab. We get to the flea market place right before they close. I rush out, I get the ring, get back in the cab, and I don't even know what she said. I forgot what she said, but that was it. That was the last straw. And just hear this volcanic eruption, and the minute that it's coming out of my mouth, I already know that I'm already regretting what I said, because I went like, you've been out of control, you have no self-discipline, you've been in this feeding frenzy, you've been in a frenzy of food and shopping, and you've been out of control, and the minute that I say it, I'm already feeling bad for it. And she was great. She didn't defend, she didn't explain. Of course, now she's happy with a big old ring on her finger. But flash forward 3 months, and I'm actually really glad for the experience. I'm glad that I overrode it, because it turns out that was her anniversary. My dad passed a few years ago, and he would always give her jewelry. So I'm glad that she got jewelry on her birthday. We figured it out eventually, and I've gotten really good mileage out of the story. Because flash forward a few months, and I'm in New York visiting for work, and I get an email from a friend who's a personal shopper, and she goes, hey, I heard you're in town, I want to gift you with a day of personal shopping. I was like, oh wow. I've never had a personal shopper, and I don't really enjoy going to the stores that much, and I do need some new stuff for work, for speaking engagements, so all right, that'd be great. In my mind, $500 max. $4,000 later, I should have known that a personal shopper is not going to take me to Ross. I'm sitting there with all these bags in a total overwhelm. It actually turned out to be $3,000. There was a $1,000 piece I couldn't do it, but I returned it. But at this point in the story, I'm sitting with $4,000 worth of clothing, more than I've spent in probably 15, 20 years of clothing before this. Like numb, don't even know what to do except call my mom, the shopaholic. Who's going to appreciate all this stuff? My mom. So I pick up the phone and I'm calling her and I'm telling her, I got this and I got that and I got the other thing. And in either a moment of total brilliance and inspiration, or she'd been sitting on it, just waiting for the right moment, but she goes, oh, so you went into the frenzy. Busted, right? So what's in there was here too. That same capacity to go out of control and to lose the self-discipline is in me too. I just have it a lot better managed. So if we want to be free, if we want to use our relationships, we get this into a lot deeper in the relationships retreats. If we want to use our relationships consciously to see some of those blind spots, some of those areas in us that are in need of healing, turning the mirror around, reeling in or reeling back our projections is mandatory. If it's there, it's here. So your homework this week is to find an example. Somebody says something or does something that really gets you. All right, so we can get really clear. What did they do that got us so upset? So tell the story, get it out there. Don't be sweet and spiritual about it. Let it rip. Then turn the mirror around. How do I do that? And it could be really subtle. It could be in relationship to some aspect of yourself that you hadn't even considered yet. And this work is really heroic. It takes time. It takes things to be mindful and to figure out these aspects of ourselves. But the reward is so worth it. It's freedom. So thank you for saying yes to the call for heroes.